about education, use cases, challenges, and benefits of using virtual reality for adult education. And I think we have a great case of two companies that help people learn different skills in virtual reality, and they're different but in some ways but alike in others ways. And so we have like adult workspace education, and we also have sports training, and I think we will gain a lot of things from this talk. So we will start with one simple question, so simple but yet so important for a lot of people. So I would ask Bharani and Gregory to share your story, and overall, how did you start working with virtual reality and with the technology, and what led you to the place where you are today? So Gregory, if you could introduce your path to where you are today.
Sure. So we started with tennis. And the reason why we started with tennis is that there is nobody who has digitalized tennis so far. There are so many things you can do in tennis, from motion learning, which is our core business, down to playing matches without physical distance, or having e-tournaments, or having mental training, tactical training, technical training, all kind of training schemes, but also high score competitions and many other things. So digitalizing tennis gives you so many opportunities which are far beyond what you get on the real court. And that's why we started actually this project.
But why did you start working in VR overall, aside from tennis? How did you get to this? Like, if we talk about your college years and what made you pick this path and this specific career path, if you're comfortable sharing about that. Sure.
Well, we wanted to have an authentic training, and if you look at all the electronic devices, how can you really, learn tennis if you're just, moving your fingers on a mobile? This is not tennis. And if you're just waving in front of the television, like on the Wii, this is not tennis. So the only way to really become totally immersive and learn authentic moves is actually to convert the real court environment with the authentic ball physics into the metaverse. And that's what we have done. So you put your headsets on and you are beamed on a real tennis court, and you play tennis as on the real court. And this only happens in VR, because otherwise you will never have that authentic feeling of being somewhere else than on the real court, or on the virtual court.
Yeah, I could totally get it. The experience of being somewhere else is a very interesting experience, especially when you do this for the first time. And we were just talking in the interview about how people start smiling after a couple of minutes in virtual reality, because they realize, like, this is a different world, I'm somewhere else, and I can do anything here. So Bharani, what about you? What is your story? Could you share a little bit, please, about you and the TransfrVR? How did it started?
Sure. So this is my second startup. My first startup was also in education, and I just I'm motivated to help people learn. That's mostly because I was born abroad in India, and then my parents moved to the United States, kind of with this hope that I would get a good education and do well, and that turned out to be true for me. So I've always been trying to figure out how to enable other people to have get a good learning experience and get on a career path for themselves. So I got into VR because I went to the Game Developers Conference in San Francisco in 2017, and I was just attending some talks and kind of floating around with no agenda. And then I just saw this humongous booth that Facebook, when it was called Facebook, or Oculus rather, had. And there was this huge line. And I was like, well, what is that? I gotta go see what that is. And it was a live demo to play the game Robo Recall, which I don't know if anybody's played Robo Recall in VR. But I took off the headset after playing Robo Recall, and it was just so obvious to me that this was going to be such a powerful medium for learning, and no one was doing it. Like, it was almost exclusively gaming and entertainment for VR in 2017. And so I thought, man, I would love to figure out how this can be used for learning and development. And so started the company TransfrVR. So the name Transfer implies knowledge transfer. So we specialize in transferring knowledge from experts to novices. And the way we do that is we create these training simulations in virtual reality that people can put on and feel what it's like to do the job before they get a job. And there's a digital coach that talks to them and helps them learn from their mistakes in real time.
Yeah, thank you. That sounds amazing. I can almost feel this experience of you like playing robocall and having this aha moment that this could be used in education.
Right.
If you are willing to share those like key elements, because you've been working since 2017, obviously on educational programs, and there have been a lot of immersions done. So could you share what are the key elements to make those successful? Because there is so much that goes into this project. And if you could figure out like 3, for example, key elements that you need to know to create a successful immersive educational training.
Sure. I think the most important thing, which I think gets overlooked a lot, is you need to make sure there's a market. Right? So before you even get into the development and the technology, like, you really have to understand, like, what is it going to be used for, and are people actually going to pay for that? Because if you don't have a market, then there's no customer, and if you don't have a customer, then it's very unlikely that you're going to be able to iterate on your product experience. I think the second thing is just getting a really good understanding of what is the quality bar for your target customer. So, not everything has to be done in like Unreal Engine, like ridiculously high photorealistic graphics. So like really understanding like what is the quality bar for your end user that they can, live with. And then I think the last thing is thinking through like, what is the exceptional experience that you're going to create that nobody else has created, right? People, put on VR for the first time, and like you said, they got a big smile on their face, and that's true. But that smile goes away if you don't come back with something that wows them every single time they put on the headset. And so there's this massive like creative element that comes into play. And those 3 things, that's all before you even get into development. Like, development is like the last thing you do. Like, you need to kind of get all those things figured out before you start developing the experience, because if not, then you're going to make a lot of painful mistakes and expensive mistakes.
Yeah, thank you. I agree. Like, know your market, know your quality that people expect, and make exceptional experiences. These are one of the most strong things that you can do planning ahead of development. And yeah, so I kind of have the same question for Gregory. I know your education like tutorials are different from what Bharani has, but I would love to know what are the key elements for creation of your tutorials, because what are the 3 things that are very important to know before you get into sports educational VR training and immersive trainings?
I think what you have to be aware of is that there is a hurdle of somebody setting up a headset and making yourself blind and going into a different world. There is some kind of a hurdle you have to overcome. And to make somebody overcome that hurdle, you have to have something really appealing, something really which blows off your mind, which is so much different, so much added value that you can overcome that hurdle. And the second thing, which I think it's very important, is that you have some kind of application where people come back. Not only that you have the wow effect, which you usually have after 1 or 2 or 3 minutes, but what happens after half an hour? What happens after 1 or 2 days? Are the people just putting away the headset and said that was fun? What's the next thing? Or do they come back to your application and say, yes, that gives me value, and they stay with you? I think these are the 2 important facts from my point of view.
Yeah, I think those are great. Like coming back and making sure that they are comfortable, especially in sports. I could imagine, like, I'm a big fan of dancing in virtual reality, and this could be not safe, I should say, especially if you have kids running around, dogs running around, someone could get hurt. So you have to make sure that people who are using your applications are really safe and took those precaution measures.
Yes.
There is so many misconceptions about virtual reality, not only concerning gaming. So I would wonder, like, what are the main misconceptions that you bumped into, and like how you deal with them? Like when you come and tell people, I have this company that does these great things, and people are like, oh, virtual reality, Pokemon Go, or like whatever they try to say you. So how do you deal with that?
Are you asking me?
Yep, Gregory, if you could continue.
Yes, sure. Well, I think the first thing is which people always come back and say, oh, do I get dizzy? Is there any motion sickness coming into the place? And I think that was a little bit of the mistake of the very first years of VR, that the software was not good enough or the hardware was not good enough, that people became motion sick. Well, that's basically over, as I can see all the applications, but that's still in the head of many people, that you get motion sick in VR. The second thing is, people sometimes do not understand what added value you really get, what advantages, what benefits you get out of VR comparing to real life. And you really have to walk them through it and show it to them and demonstrate and let them try to fully understand the potential of VR. It's very hard for people to immediately get it, to get all the potential which is out there. And you can see the dynamics of this market, that you have a huge dynamics now coming into place where people start to understand what's all about it. And I think Facebook or Meta now made a good job, half a year ago, by changing the name from Facebook and making people aware that this is more than the next internet coming.
Yeah, I think Metaverse kind of turned the tables over. And if last year in August I was trying to promote virtual reality and people were looking at me like I'm like, what are you talking about? So after Metaverse announcement, I feel like a lot of people in the world, they finally learned what Metaverse is. And so this kind of was a promotional thing for everyone. But at that point, some of the people did have good perception. So they kind of had no understanding of what virtual reality is, but at that point they made their own mind. And some of these misconceptions are now harmful. So they're not helping to promote the virtual reality overall. Bharani, if you could share what are the most common misconceptions when people come to you and say that we need virtual reality training for our workers? Like what are the most common misconceptions, if you could share?
I mean, so I think Gregory kind of hit the nail on the head with the first one, which is, VR sucks. That's what people used to think all the time because they've heard stories about people getting sick and that kind of thing. I think the other big one is that, people always say, well, VR is not going to be as big as AR. Like, oh, I prefer AR. And like the reality is, like, it just totally depends on what it is that you're doing, right? Like I can imagine if I was going to play tennis, I'd rather have a VR tennis experience than an AR experience, right? Mm-hmm. Versus, like, let's say if you were, a repairman, right? And you're out in the field and you have to repair like a truck or something, maybe AR would be better because you need that information in like real time. And so, confusing AR and VR, I think, was a really big thing in the early days. Now, I think people kind of understand that if you're training and you're just like, you kind of want to be in an environment where you can just focus on training and just do that. VR is a very good application for having an immersive experience and a hands-on experience. Because they're not even the same medium, right? Like you can do AR on your mobile phone, just pinching using your fingers, and it's nothing like a fully immersive experience where you have the VR headset, you can, see your hands, you can manipulate objects using your hands and all that stuff. So I'd say those are two of the big ones. In the early days, I think people would always assume if you just said VR, it was going to be exorbitant, like the cost would be outrageous and not affordable at all. I think obviously now people are seeing the cost of the hardware come down. It's, there's more developers in the field now, so the economics are starting to make a lot more sense than they did a few years ago.
Yeah, I think, and one of the part is that you can spread virtual reality way more, way easier than you would literally have to fly the instructor to some other part of the world and just make sure that he speaks the language and is able to teach the group of people on the other side of the world the same things. So you just kind of ship the headsets, and this is kind of easier. And I also wanted to talk about the difference. We're talking about, we kind of touched like AR and VR, but if we go into, I would say, somehow traditional online learning, like online learning courses through video and stuff like that, do you see the difference, and what is the impact that virtual reality brought for people? Like, you would probably tell how different the impact is and the results of people who go through just online training, watching videos, like Zoom calls and things like that, versus going into virtual reality and actually trying the scale. Is there a difference, and could you see this?
So it just definitely not just our company, but multiple companies have kind of run efficacy studies and like A/B tests or side-by-side comparisons, and have seen that, people learning via an immersive experience can learn, 50% faster or 75% faster, just depending on the task. So I think as more and more people go through immersive training, like you'll see more and more results for sure. But I think that probably one of the biggest factors is just like the engagement factor, right? So if you're watching a online video and then you take like an online quiz, there's 4 choices, right? Or whatever. It's a very defined set of responses that you can give, versus in an immersive learning experience where it's hands-on, like it kind of simulates the real world. So you have almost an infinite number of choices of what you can do. And so learning is a little bit more realistic in that sense, right? Because it's not just some arbitrary textbook or arbitrary multiple choice question. It's, you have to do the task as you would do it in a live environment. So I think that's what a lot of trainers and faculty members view as really valuable, is that it's just closer to the real thing.
Yeah, thank you. Gregory, could you share your experience? I know that you specifically created this motion tracking system that would help like people to learn swings, to do swings better and to do all this stuff. Do you see the difference in when people start training, if we compare this to like in-person training with a trainer, or like them watching videos online?
Yeah, well, in our case, it's actually very dramatic, because you can learn a language, you can learn anything online, but tennis you cannot learn online. If you see a video on tennis, That does not make you learn tennis. There's no way. You have to do the motion. You have to strike the ball. It does not help you to watch a YouTube video about how you strike a serve if you cannot do it right away. It gives you some kind of impact, but it has no real value as a training. That means that you have to go to the real court to learn tennis. Now, in our case, it's the first time ever you do not have to go to the court. You can learn tennis at home. And not only that you can learn tennis at home, you have two different kind of advantages. The one is you can see with every strike you do, with every hit, what is your velocity of the ball? What is the spin? How do you hit the ball? All that stuff. You get information which you don't get on the real court. And the second thing is, in the future, you can book a trainer online. If there's a fantastic trainer in Argentina, which I like to get a lesson from, I don't have to travel to Argentina to get a lesson. I can do it from home. I can book him from home and say, give me your training lesson in tennis. I want to learn your technique. There's no way you can do that in real life unless you take a plane and fly to Argentina and stay a few days there and then go back again, and then you're just 1 week there. Who can do that? So in our case, VR gives you a dramatic advantage, which is not out there for other stuff like learning a language or whatever.
Yeah, I can see the impact is really big. And who are the people who are training? Are they just regular tennis amateurs, or are there some real sportsmen who want to upgrade their skills, and who are the normal audience for your application?
We're targeting the recreational players, so the mass. We're not targeting the top 10 or top 100. I don't think there's any realistic way to get them into VR tennis. They are in the tennis world, but you have 80 million players out there playing tennis who want to improve the game and who improve the technique. So these are our target audiences.
This is amazing. And Bharani, we talked some time ago that you were not only creating these videos not the videos, but immersive trainings for workers, but also tapping into just college students to help them figure out what they want to do. And this taps a little bit into upward mobility. Could you share about the project that you do for people just to figure out what they want to do in the future, and how is this part going as well?
Yeah, sure. So we focus mostly on what are called middle skills here in the United States. So these are skills that do not require a college degree to get a job. They don't require a 4-year university education, but they are jobs that pay well. And so a lot of people don't necessarily know that these jobs exist. And so when they put on the headset, they can try out a variety of occupations. They can see what it's like to work in the automotive sector or aerospace or healthcare or nursing. And in so doing, kind of see what job opportunities might be interesting for them and see what's like the best fit for them. And that helps us live up to our mission, which is we just want to get everybody into a career path that enables them to, get a job that pays well, take care of their family, and enjoy life. So that's kind of what we're all about.
Yeah, I think it's a lot of people spend their lives looking after the job that is not the job, that is a hobby that brings money. And this is a part of this mission to make people happier. So it's almost like virtual reality for good. There is the VR for good. So
Yeah.
that part, I think that's amazing. If we come back to the development and creation side of immersive training, could you show us a little bit of the kitchen behind it? Like when you create this video, do you have all this knowledge already, or do you work with the experts? Like, how do you know how to operate all this heavy machinery, or for example, how to do culinary course? Like, could you share a little bit about the kitchen behind this immersive training videos?
Yeah, I mean, it's a super creative process, right? It involves a lot of people. It involves having subject matter experts, having instructional designers, having artists, people who are familiar with VR, like developers, all that stuff. And so there's a fair amount of research that's involved up front. So you really have to understand what are the tasks that are needed, that someone, you're trying to model a certain type of behavior, right? You want to show, you want to be able to perform a task the same way an expert does it. You need to first study the expert. After that, then it's a matter of having a good intuition about like what is a good fit for virtual reality and what is not. What would be a total waste of time. And so while something like tennis might be great for VR, swimming probably less so. And so just having like that intuition for like what will work and what won't work. And then it's a bit like making a movie, right? Like you have to have a script, like you have to have an understanding of like what will keep someone's attention and what will be just totally boring and useless. And it's a lot of trial and error. So it is a lot closer to how it's some combination of education, movie making, and game design is all I can tell you. So it's like a very different way of operating than any of those industries have operated in the past.
Yeah, I think that's an amazing mix of different types of experience and subject matter experts, and and it brings value. So that's the main part. And Gregory, could you share a little bit, like back to you, and sharing a little bit about the kitchen and the way the process works behind the things, and like how are this? So when you create this swings and traction, and like how do you know that this is the best way to swing, for example? Or do you have subject matter experts? Like how is this all created? Could you share a little bit?
Yes, well, in our case, that's a little bit complicated because we have different kind of high tech components which we have to bring together. So the one side is the biomechanics, which is a science by itself. Then you have the tennis experts telling you how tennis works. Then you have the whole motion capture, the whole motion tracking. Then you have the VR technology. Then you have the hardware part. And last but not least, you have the graphics, and you have all the gamification part. So it's a huge portfolio of technology which comes together here.
Yeah, that's an extensive work. So whenever you want to create a sports app, yeah, there is definitely like biomechanics and a lot of experts come into play. And so let's talk a little bit about the future. What is in the future for VR motion learning? Like where are you going next? So in the next 5 years, could you share a little bit about your plans and how do you going to expand, or maybe you're going to tap into some different types of sports? So what are you planning?
Well, we're going to go in 3 different fields. The one is tennis itself. So we're going to create an e-tennis league so that you can have worldwide tournaments, you can have teams. In tennis, there's no Real Madrid, there's no New York Yankees. You just have some individuals like Djokovic and Roger Federer, but you don't have teams playing against each other. So the whole league concept is a huge opportunity in tennis. That's the one part. The second part is that with our ball physics, we can do then more than just tennis. We can do cricket, we can do golf, we can do paddle tennis, we can do many kind of ball sports. That's the second part. And the third part, which is very interesting, is the whole rehab part. People with disabilities or people with injuries or people after surgeries, they want to improve the motion and learn basically coming back to real life, or want to have the illusion of planets on the board which they don't have in real life. The third part which we're looking into.
Yeah, I think that's an amazing way to go, especially the rehab, the rehabilitation. There are so many companies that go in after that, and yeah, helping people learn how to like rehabilitate according to some of their disabilities or overall after trauma on the sports field, for example. Yeah, so that's a good way to go. So I'm hoping that in 5 years we get back together and you'll share the story about the leagues and how you acquired new types of sports and created new apps. And by the way, it's funny, but there is this thing I never saw in my life. But in United States, we have a court nearby our house, and it's called pickleball, and it's like smaller size tennis. So that's another fun thing to do with with ball physics. So Bharani, back to you. It's almost the same question. So what is next for Transfer, and where are you going? What are the plans for the future in the next 5 years? Are there any other areas that you hope everyone?
Yeah, I think in the future, so we definitely plan to continue to expand what we're doing. We started in manufacturing. We're going into healthcare, and so there are 50% of the economy in the United States is middle skilled jobs. I think that's probably largely true, representative worldwide, maybe more so worldwide as well. So there's more to do in the U.S., and then even the things that we've already done in the U.S., we probably would be interested in kind of sharing what we've done abroad, because a lot of the jobs are similar. And then, I think today the focus has very much been on like controllers. I think in the future you're going to see more hands-free, just interacting with your regular hands in VR. So, and then you'll also see a lot more of the crossover between AR and VR through kind of the pass-through type of technology. So, look, I think it is a fun place to innovate in. I think if you're serving customers in this space and they're happy with your service, they're going to come back excited for what you have next year, because this space is just changing so much. I know our customers love it when they see our portfolio of experiences explode from 10 to 100 to 200 kind of experiences. So, and I think they're going to be excited to see the quality of the experience improve as well.
Sorry, I think that's amazing future, and yeah, especially going into this crossover, exploring new technologies as well as the technology adapts and make it less pricey. So that's the way to go, and new fields, helping middle workers, and yeah, so that's the fun part. So looking forward to hearing from your experiences even more. So I think this kind of concludes our panel and main discussion. And I would love to hear some questions if we do have questions from the audience to Bharani and Gregory. So please, this is the time to get in and talk about some questions.
Yeah, I love both the speakers' experiences and their use cases. The tennis one especially resonates because my husband spends too much money on his tennis coaching. He can definitely, hopefully, spend it on the classes and reduce my monthly expenditures. Regarding the education piece, that's also very, very exciting. Both my parents are academicians, and so education resonates with me. Not just that, being able to teach in a metaverse, for instance, is very good, because you can't reconstruct some of the past today. Like imagine going into a historical ruin, being able to build it up and showing a history student exactly what it would have felt like in the 13th century as opposed to now. Very exciting. And then, the whole family should get involved. So I was looking at my daughter, she learns classical Indian dance, and finding a teacher is extremely difficult, very expensive and time consuming. So the whole story about how a tennis champ in Argentina can add value to my everyday experience would be so fascinating.
That sounds amazing. There is like a world of possibilities, and I specifically like this. There is a commercial going on Facebook where the grandma and like her granddaughter, they come to the patio outside and they explore the questions about the universe, like make planets bigger. There is like the universe on the screen. So I feel like this is a touch about the future, and also the place to connect, not just to kind of go into virtual reality and cut out yourself from the real world, but also to connect with the family. So that's the good point in terms of dancing and history overall.
Yeah, but I have one question though. Like, when we are talking about these headsets and in our individualized space, that is one thing. How do we connect this with the metaverse, which is more like a little bit of a social setup? Maybe it's not really social, but we do think of it like the next gen social platform in which how you interface. So how do you start to have the more than one interaction and, get to know people, make sure that you are in a trusted environment and interface not just with inanimate things, but with other animate folks as well. So that part, even though I've attended a couple of conferences, has always been a little fuzzy and hazy because of the definition of the metaverse. There's no central, and there's no single one. There's like centralized versions and decentralized versions. So even if as a budding enthusiast, if I were to say I want to build something in the metaverse, where would I even start with? Like, is it Sandbox? Is it Decentraland? Is it a Meta? Like, how do you guide someone in that process? Because it's a little more than just VR, AR, right? At that point.
Yeah.
That is a great question. I don't know, Gregory, if you want to go first, but I have a few thoughts.
Yeah, Bharani, if you have a few thoughts, please share.
Yeah, so I think this kind of relates back to your original question about what are some of the common misconceptions. And so I think one of the biggest misconceptions is that like somebody owns the metaverse, right? And the metaverse is not, it's in theory, it's everywhere, it's everything, right? And so if you were trying to develop for the metaverse, what you would do is you would just start developing the same way we did at Transfer. So now Transfer is considered like our virtual training facility. If you were to access it, would be considered like a location in the metaverse, a destination in the metaverse. So, presumably millions of people are going to create awesome experiences in the metaverse. But it's not exactly today, for example, it's not exactly like, the World Wide Web where you just go to a website and you type in a URL. Instead, you are creating an app or an experience, and then someone has to download that app or experience onto their hardware to access it. There's no question in the future that you could create an experience so big that millions or billions of people are kind of sharing the same space, so to speak. But I think the challenge there is then you got to worry about like it becoming yet another Facebook. And so
yeah, but why don't we look at it as another internet? So there was a Google or there was a Yahoo or whoever who indexed all these different applications that entrepreneurs like you are building and makes it available for an end user like me to discover. So don't you think there is a space or a need for a Google-like indexing and searching of discoverability of these fantastic apps?
There are app stores. So like Oculus Quest has an app store, HTC Vive has one as well. So there are many app stores, but like I think there are a couple of things that are different about the app store model versus like indexing, is that there's not necessarily like one index that indexes every single app. across all app stores, because the people who are creating the experiences choose where they want to host their app. So they don't necessarily host them, you know, in everybody's app store.
Yeah, I don't want to belabor. I want others to ask their questions as well. But, for an analogy, the whole tennis experience, imagine two people wanting to play tennis in the virtual world, right? So that would be the social experience. So instead of me versus machine, it's me versus you type of experience. So for that, you need to come to a common place. You need to have a common app. You have to have common understanding of dynamics and all of that stuff. Is that possible today? Or of course, people must be working on it, right?
Well, maybe I answer this question. On the tennis side, the restrictions you have today on the metaverse is that you have to have compatible hardware devices to run the software. In the internet, everyone has a laptop or a mobile or whatever, and just goes into the internet.
True.
With the metaverse, it's a little bit different because you have a heavier hardware component than in the internet, where it's not equal everywhere. Oculus has a store and HTC has a store, and yes, there are apps where you can find each other, but it's not that much developed as the internet. We are rather like in the beginning of the internet of the first few years. I don't know if you can remember, there was American Online with their private thing. There have been, different kind of portals where you get into the internet, and that started to open up, after a few years. And I think we're getting to that point when there's more hardware available. And right now, Meta is dominating the hardware sector. But if Apple comes in this year or next year, as we all believe, and there are more hardware coming in, it will be like the internet, where you just jump into the metaverse and you can reach out to anyone you want. That's my strong belief. So we're just getting there.
Got you.